What's up, everybody? Chris Pennell here, and I'm going over my quarterback tier rankings for week 9 of the fantasy football season. If you do enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let's dive right into it. And before I start, I should mention there is 4 teams on bye this week. We had 0 in week 8, 2 teams this week. So we're without the 49ers, so no Brock Purdy. Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions is also on bye week. Trevor Lawrence with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And now that you're starting him, but Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos. And that's going to trickle down to running back, receiver, and tight end this week, so it's going to be a bit interesting. Let's kick it off here. We'll have the S tier with 3 quarterbacks this week, and probably the 3 you would expect. You drafted them top 3 this season. Maybe not the order you would expect after last week's performances, but I still have to have Patrick Mahomes as my number 1 option here. I know it was a down week last week. Did pop on the injury report the morning of the game with a flu. I was like, well, this is his MJ moment, legacy game for Patrick Mahomes on the road mile high. Gonna dunk on them even though he is sick. Unfortunately, not the case. I guess Taylor Swift wasn't at the game, so maybe she's the key to this Chiefs team all season long, but either way, definitely was disappointing. Only ranked 7-8 points versus the Denver Broncos. Should bounce back here. This game features the highest over of the week, 50.5, 26.5 implied team total, which is the highest of any team this week, and 2.5 point spread in their favor. Keep in mind, this game starts at 9:30 a.m., so if you were someone like me that likes to bench all of their players with their opponent off, make sure you have them in on Sunday morning. You don't oversleep and miss that because you don't want them sitting on your bench. And the Miami Dolphins are 23rd versus quarterbacks this year, allowing nearly 20 points per game, 250 passing yards, 1.5 passing touchdown. And we could go through Mahomes' numbers, but who cares? They're starting him anyway. But I think we all know, yeah, he's pretty good at football. Coming in number 2, who honestly is a case for being the number 1 guy, especially after last week's performance. But it's Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. They currently have a 24 3/4 implied team total this week, 3-point favorites at home versus Dallas Cowboys. Now, they have been a pretty stingy team versus quarterbacks this year, which is why he's not number 1. It's why he's number 2. They're allowing the 3rd fewest points per game in the position, less than 200 passing yards per game. But Jalen Hurts' floor is like nobody else with what he can do on the ground week in, week out. The tush push always gives him a chance for a rushing touchdown near the goal line, getting over 7 designed runs per game, nearly 40 rushing yards, which is a built-in passing touchdown floor anyway. Even when he doesn't score rushing touchdowns, he had 4 passing touchdowns last week, 1 to the corpse of Julio Jones. So killed it last week versus the Commanders, nearly 270 passing yards per game on top of what he can do on the ground. Yeah, there's no stopping Jalen Hurts. The floor matched with the ceiling upside every single week is just unmatched by anybody else. And number 3, another guy that can run the football, does get goal line work. Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. The design runs are not anywhere even close to guys like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, but still always going to be a goal line threat, which gives you that nice little floor boost. And his ceiling is extremely high as well. And his passing numbers this season are honestly just pretty similar to Jalen Hurts. They throw the ball nearly the same amount of times per game, both right around 270 passing yards. Josh Allen's getting more passing touchdowns, but that comes with less rushing work, so it all balances out. And this game should be pretty exciting. Sunday Night Football, 48.5 point over-under, which is the second highest of the week, only behind that Dolphins and Chiefs game. 23-point implied team total. They come in as 2.5 point dogs. The Cincinnati Bengals are pretty much mid-pack versus quarterbacks, but I don't really care about matchups anyway. With Josh Allen, you're starting him no matter what. Moving on to our A-tier quarterbacks. These are guys that have S-tier potential, but week in, week out, they can be a bit shaky, so they're down a notch a little bit. But we have Lamar Jackson, who was in the S-tier last week. Definitely disappointed big time versus the Arizona Cardinals. Only had 11 fantasy points in that game. And it's pretty much because Gus Edwards stole all the touchdowns. He had 3 rushing touchdowns in the game. So if you somehow started Gus Edwards, it was a good matchup. Just if you're not in a deep league, you're probably not even considering it. But yeah, he definitely killed it for you. So hopefully you had him. And if you did, I hope you started him. But Lamar was definitely a disappointment, but he should bounce back versus Seattle. They're playing at home. 24-point implied team total, 5.5 point favorite. Seattle is currently 19th versus quarterbacks, allowing 260 passing yards per game. And we know Lamar, he's got the similar upside of Jalen Hurts in terms of his rushing ability. Over 5 designed runs per game, nearly 50 rushing yards. So you're almost getting a built-in passing touchdown and a half floor with Lamar Jackson. And also 0.63 rushing touchdowns per game. Doesn't get too much of the air, only throwing the ball 27 times per game and 220 passing yards. But we know the upside is there in the right matchup, which it is here versus the Seattle Seahawks. So fire up Lamar with confidence even after the down week. Then Joe Burrow rising up in the rankings. It was a really tough start to the season for the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow in general, dealing with that calf injury. But he has strung together a couple of good starts versus the San Francisco 49ers last week, where he dropped nearly 30 fantasy points, and the Arizona Cardinals a couple weeks ago. And while this is a bit of a tougher matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, they're currently allowing the 2nd fewest points per game to the quarterback position, on 13.8 points per game. This Bengals offense is starting to heat up. They throw the ball a lot. I know the numbers on Joe Burrow have not been super impressive this season. Only 216 passing yards per game, and his yards per attempt is only at 5.7 with a 66% completion percentage. But they have one of the highest implied team totals of the week at 25.5. It's in prime time. They're 2.5 point favorites. They're playing at home. They're starting Joe Burrow no matter what. He's got great weapons in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Hopefully T. Higgins can get on track at some point and flash that upside that we know he has, because it's been a very disappointing season so far. Then the flip side of this Chiefs game, we already talked about Mahomes. We have Tua here, who's going to be in the A tier. When you have weapons like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, it's going to keep you in play every single week. He's averaging nearly 300 passing yards per game, 2.25 touchdowns per game, 8.8 yards per attempt, 7% completion percentage. The Chiefs defense has been pretty tough this season, allowing less than 200 passing yards per game, third fewest, 14.5 points per game as well, but a pretty healthy 24-point implied team total, 2.5-point dogs. And I know it's a home game for the Chiefs technically, but they're still on the road in Germany, so it's a very neutral site for both teams. So it's not like we have to worry about the Arrowhead fans screaming and hollering at Tua here. So when you have weapons like he does, he's always going to be in the A or S tier every single week, depending on the matchup. Then rounding out our A tier here, we have to have Justin Herbert. We know his upside is extremely high. It's an offense that can put up a ton of points. You have great weapons in Austin Eckler, Joshua Palmer, and Keenan Allen, obviously. Tight end position can always be a bit hit or miss, but they do have weapons there. Matchup versus the Jets isn't amazing. They are on the road, which I don't love for Justin Herbert. I like when they're at home in the Dome. 22.25 implied team total here. They come in as 3-point favorites. 270 yards per game for Justin Herbert, nearly 2 passing touchdowns. Not going to get you too much on the ground either. The Jets are currently 11th versus quarterback, so like I said, it's not an amazing matchup, allowing less than 200 passing yards per game, but with a guy like Justin Herbert, as talented he is in, and a good offense with good weapons, he still has to be in the A tier for me. Moving down to the B tier, it's a quarterback that is rising in the rankings. It was a bit of a tough start for Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys offensively, but he has been money the past couple of weeks. Now, they have been some really good matchups, but once again, gets another really good matchup versus this Eagles defense that is bleeding points to the quarterback position this year, allowing the 5th most points per game, 270 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 20.7 points per game. And like I said, Dak Prescott has definitely been hot the past 2 weeks with 25 points versus the Chargers in week 6. And last week versus the Rams, 32 points, 25 for 31, 300 yards, and 4 passing touchdowns. Like I said, it's a very good matchup here versus the Philadelphia Eagles, so hopefully the good times keep on rolling. They're on the road, but I'm still not overly concerned about that. And believe it or not, that is all I have for the B tier. There's quite a bit of a drop-off here after Dak Prescott, and there's just so many bad quarterbacks in the league right now. Like, yeah, we have some extremely good guys like Mahomes, Hurts, Allen. Then the A tier is full of good guys as well. And we've seen Dak Prescott be good. We've seen him be really bad. He can go either way. But after that, especially with the bye weeks we had this week, I mean, there is just not too much to be excited about the quarterback position league right now. We've seen some pretty bad QB play. Like if you guys watched the Monday night game with Jimmy Garoppolo, oh my goodness, he missed Devontae Adams for like a 98-yard touchdown and a 60-yard touchdown, wide open. It was very unfortunate to watch him. But leading us off with the C tier, that's how you know it's pretty bad. We have Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints, and he's actually had 3 straight weeks of 20 fantasy points. So why not be pretty? And I don't think he's very good. He does have weapons in Chris Olave, who at some point, please break out. Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara in the backfield, a bit of a check down merchant, but and we also have Shaheed, who has these random blow-up games here and there, so that offers another dimension for a deep threat. But great matchup versus the Bears, 26 versus quarterbacks, allowing 20.5 points per game, 270 passing yards, over 2 passing touchdowns. It's not pretty, but they're playing at home, 24-point implied team total, which is actually higher than the likes of Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert this week, and right on par with Tua, and not too far off of guys like Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, so I'll take it. I think Derek Carr is a fine streamer this week because the quarterback position is ugly. Then we have the rookie, CJ Stroud. He gets a halfway decent matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bit of a pass funnel defense. They're currently ranked 25th versus quarterbacks, allowing over 270 passing yards per game. You know, there's no shortage of weapons here. For CJ Stroud, you have Tank Dell, Nico Collins. They also have Noah Brown. Now, they did struggle last week, but hopefully it's a nice bounce back performance here. And we know this Buccaneers defense is definitely not too great versus the pass. And the Texans struggle to run the ball anyway, which is what the Buccaneers are good at. So this is a pretty good game script for CJ Stroud and all of his weapons. And then I have no idea if he's going to play or not, but if he does get a good matchup versus the Cardinals and he would be in play. But we have no idea what's really going on with him. They currently have a 22.5 implied team total. They are 7.5-point favorites. Now, I think that would probably be the same whether Watson plays or not, because I think we know the Cardinals are just pretty pushover matchup these days. They're currently 24th versus quarterbacks. He's got good weapons in Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku, if he does end up playing. But I have no idea as of right now. If it's PJ Walker, he's still not startable for me. He looks terrible watching Browns games, but Deshaun Watson at least has some resemblance of upside. And then rounding out our QB1s here, because this comes in at number 12, and it's pretty bad we're at number 12 and we're already pretty deep into the C tier here. We have Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this is solely just based off a matchup, and he has 2 great receivers to get the ball to, and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, even though Godwin sold him on the Hail Mary. Perfect throw from Baker, which is Godwin forgot how to catch a football or what to do on a Hail Mary, unfortunately. But Houston's currently 21st versus quarterbacks, allowing just over 19 points per game, 250 passing yards, not many passing touchdowns, only an 18.5 implied team total for the Buccaneers. They are road dogs versus Houston, but look, when you throw the ball a decent amount of times, over 30 times per game, and a good chunk of that's going to Evans and Godwin, at least have a chance to be a QB1 in this slate. Moving down to our QB2s, they're pretty much all going to be in the D tier here. It's basically a QB graveyard because I don't want to start any of these guys this week, and if you do, well, good luck. Hopefully you just get a random good game. But we're going to lead off with Geno Smith as QB13 for me. And even if Watson is out, that's potentially QB12. So that's just how bad this week is for the quarterback position. 18.5 point implied team total for the Seattle Seahawks, but such a tough matchup on the road in Baltimore. They're allowing the fewest points per game in the quarterback position, 12.5 points per game, less than one passing touchdown, and barely 200 passing yards. And Geno Smith has not been that good this year for fantasy purposes. I was looking at his game log recently, and it's just not much to be desired. We have one game above 20 points, and that was week 2 versus Detroit. Besides that, we just have a steady flow of like 15-point games, which isn't going to kill you as long as you have a good enough roster to get that through. But if you have to start Geno this week, do not expect him to carry you. Then up next, we have, it's unfortunate, even his headshot looks a bit funky, but Daniel Jones. And I realized the last time we saw him play football, it was about the worst thing you could imagine. But he gets a good matchup versus the Raiders. It's still only an 18-point implied team total for the New York Giants. They're on the road. But Daniel Jones at least offers you rushing upside. So that's the one saving grace with him because he is averaging less than 200 passing yards per game, 5.9 yards per attempt, which is terrible. The weapons aren't great out there. I'm not sure if Darren Waller is going to play or not, even though it seems like Daniel Jones doesn't like Darren Waller anyway. So I'm not sure what it matters. But he gets you 40 yards on the ground per game with 4 designed runs. That's at least a passing touchdown floor with what he can do on the ground himself. So that's going to make him somewhat viable, and let's hope Darren Waller's all right with the hamstring issue. Up next is Sam Howell, who someone said I was the pretty Sam Howell, and I kind of laughed at that. But I guess I can somewhat see the resemblance there with the facial hair. But anyway, Sam Howell balled out versus the Philadelphia Eagles, which is not the reason why I like Dak Prescott. They've just been getting killed by quarterbacks this year. And while Sam Howell's not a household name, he at least has some decent numbers this year. 270 passing yards per game, 1.5 passing touchdowns, throwing the ball 35 times per game, which is really nice. And runs the ball a little bit. It's not a ton, but it does get you close to 20 yards per game on the ground. Not a great matchup versus the Patriots. They're kind of middle of the road versus quarterbacks, and they're just such an ugly, slow team that it's really not fun to play against them. But Howell's at least in the conversation with how well he's been playing. I guess you could make the case he's above Daniel Jones. I just like the matchup a little bit better versus the Raiders, and he runs the ball more. But honestly, it's a bit of a coin flip there. And then we have the rookie, Will Levis. Amazing first game for him. I was very shocked to expect that versus the Falcons because they've been pretty good defensively so far this season. Actually, one of the better defenses overall versus quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. But he balled out 4 touchdowns, 3 of them to DeAndre Hopkins. I know DeAndre Hopkins is super excited that it looks like he has a quarterback that is willing to chuck him the football. Decent matchup versus Pittsburgh. They're middle of the road versus quarterbacks, but allowing nearly 270 passing yards per game. Levis was at 8.4 yards per attempt in that one. Had 4 touchdowns, like I said. Threw the ball only 25 times, but 6 rushing attempts, which is really nice out of Levis. But I mean, it's a decent matchup. Quarterback position is thin this week. This is a Thursday night game, which I don't love because these games always tend to be really low scoring. And he has a 16.75 implied team total, which sucks. Only a 36.5 point over under. But if we can get 2 touchdowns and 250 yards, it's okay. And finishing off our D tier here, we have Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. And man, he is just not that good of a quarterback. 57% completion percentage, bad throw percentage is really high up there. Does run the ball a little bit. You're getting 25 yards on the ground per game, which keeps him afloat, 0.3 rushing touchdowns. So that's like the one saving grace for him. Also, touchdown-wise, he hasn't been that bad this year. Now, with the way he throws the ball, like so far this year, I mean, that's obviously, that touchdown rate's got to go down. 213 yards, but over 1.5 passing touchdowns per game. But it is a really good matchup versus the Los Angeles Rams here, who they're 22nd versus quarterbacks, 19.3 points per game and 230 passing yards. And we just saw Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys absolutely murder this defense. Now, they're a bit of a better offense than the Green Bay Packers, and Dak is better than Jordan Love. But we're just looking at scraps here at the bottom of the barrel, and Jordan Love is at least somewhat viable because he has 2 touchdown upside. And now for the first time ever, we have created an F tier at quarterback. And if you have to start one of these guys, just pack it up for the week. It's probably not going to be too pretty. Although, there is a couple that do crack the top 20 this week, so if you're in a pinch, they're here. We're going to start up Gardner Minshew of the Indianapolis Colts. He has shown some upside. It's a good matchup versus Carolina. Now, they do rank 11 versus quarterbacks, but this is not a very good defense. It does have a pretty healthy 23.75 implied team total, and this game features a 44.5 implied team total. Both these defenses are bad, and while both quarterbacks are not amazing, they do have some similar stats this year, and they have decent weapons to get the ball to. For Minshew, you have Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, you have Taylor, Zach Moss out of the backfield. So Minshew is borderline a QB2 this week. Then on the flip side of this game, Bryce Young, and while he has not been exciting either, this game does, like I said, feature a pretty high over-under. It's a 3-point spread, 21-point implied team total for the Carolina Panthers, and this is a great matchup through the air. The Indianapolis Colts are currently 29th versus quarterbacks, having the 4th most points per game. Young and only 200 yards per game this year, 31 pass attempts, but hopefully him and Thielen can hook up a couple of times, and I would not be too surprised in this matchup. Then running at the top 20. If you watched him on Monday Night Football, you're probably wondering why he's even here, and I'm questioning that myself. But Garoppolo gets a good matchup versus the Giants, and he still has good weapons to get the ball to in Adams and Jacoby Myers. Assuming Adams doesn't force his way off the team by 4 p.m. today, which I'm recording this at noon, so hey, that's always a chance. But he still has good weapons, and at some point he's going to have to feed them. I don't know how, because he looks awful out there, but the offensive line can block for him a little bit. It's a good spot versus the Giants, and hopefully he can get back on track. With that being said, that's all I got for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. I'll have my running back tier rankings up later either today or tomorrow. But I wish you all the best of luck this weekend, and whatever you do, I'll see you all next time. And happy Halloween.